Three visitors to Abraham, Genesis 18:1 to 15. Welcome to Bible Story Time. Today, we're going to explore a profound moment in the life of Abraham when three mysterious visitors came to his tent and brought with them the promise of a son. Watch till the end to discover the deeper lessons in this encounter and the fulfillment of God's promises. The story begins in the heat of the day, as Abraham is sitting by the entrance to his tent. He's resting under the shade of a tree when he notices three men standing nearby. These men were not just ordinary travelers, and Abraham, though initially unaware, would soon discover that they were messengers from God himself. Abraham's hospitality. Despite the scorching heat, Abraham immediately runs to meet the visitors. In those days, hospitality was of utmost importance, and Abraham's actions reflected the warm Middle Eastern tradition of welcoming strangers. "My Lord, if I have found favor in your eyes, do not pass your servant by," Abraham says, showing respect and offering them rest, water, and food. Abraham invites the visitors to stay, and in response, they accept his offer. What Abraham doesn't yet know is that these visitors are not just men, they are angels, messengers from God. The promise of a son. As the visitors sit down to eat, they make a remarkable announcement. They tell Abraham that Sarah, his wife, will have a son. Now Sarah, who overhears this conversation from inside the tent, laughs to herself. After all, she and Abraham are both very old, and the idea of her giving birth to a child seems utterly impossible. But the visitor, who speaks as if he is the Lord himself, asks why Sarah laughed. He then makes a statement that cuts to the core of this whole encounter. Is anything too hard for the Lord? Genesis 18:14. This question is at the heart of the message of this story. Despite the impossibility of the situation, God's promises are always true, and nothing is beyond his ability to accomplish. The visitor continues by reassuring Abraham that Sarah will indeed bear a son within the year. Sarah's doubt and God's assurance. Sarah, hearing this, denies laughing, but the Lord knows her heart. God gently rebukes her for her doubt, emphasizing that his word will never fail. God speaks truth into Sarah's life, even when she is hesitant to believe. This moment reveals an important lesson. God sees our doubts, but he remains faithful to his promises, even when we struggle to trust them. The importance of faith. This story of Abraham and Sarah is one of the most remarkable demonstrations of faith and God's sovereignty in the Bible. Both Abraham and Sarah had been waiting for God's promise of a child for years, and now when it seemed physically impossible, God tells them that they will have a son. Abraham's response was not one of disbelief or anger, but rather trust in God's will. He believed in the power of God to do what seemed impossible, and that faith was what set Abraham apart as a man of God. The divine plan. This moment in Abraham's life foreshadows an even greater miracle, the birth of Jesus Christ, which would be impossible in human terms, but entirely within the power of God. Just as Sarah's old age could not prevent the fulfillment of God's promise, so too the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, which seemed impossible, was part of God's perfect plan for the salvation of mankind. Lessons from the three visitors to Abraham. There are several important lessons we can take from this encounter. God's timing is perfect. Although it may seem that God's promises take too long to be fulfilled, we can be certain that his timing is always perfect. Abraham and Sarah waited many years, but when the time was right, God delivered his promise. Nothing is impossible for God. The question, is anything too hard for the Lord, reminds us that no matter how impossible our situations may seem, God is able to do the impossible. There is nothing beyond his power or his reach. Faith in God's promises. Even when circumstances seem impossible, God's promises remain unshaken. Abraham believed in God's word, and his faith was counted as righteousness. We are called to have that same kind of unwavering faith in God's promises no matter the challenges. God sees our hearts. Sarah's initial doubt and laughter did not go unnoticed by God. This shows us that God sees our hearts even when we try to hide our doubts or fears. However, he is always ready to reassure us with his faithfulness. The importance of hospitality. Abraham's example of hospitality teaches us the importance of loving and serving others, especially strangers. God honors those who show kindness and generosity, just as Abraham was blessed with a divine encounter for his hospitality. The fulfillment of the promise. Though Sarah laughed at the thought of bearing a child, she eventually did conceive, and Isaac was born. Isaac's birth was not just a fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham and Sarah, but a symbol of God's faithfulness to fulfill every promise he makes, no matter how impossible it may seem. The name Isaac itself means laughter, a reminder of that joyful moment when Sarah laughed in disbelief, but later in faith rejoiced in the fulfillment of God's word. Just as God faithfully fulfilled his promises to Abraham and Sarah, he is faithful to fulfill his promises in your life as well. If you are struggling with doubt or waiting on God's promises, remember, nothing is too hard for the Lord. If this story encouraged you, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to Bible Storytime. Stay tuned for the next video, where we continue to explore more of God's incredible stories of faith and obedience.